Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to Wake Up in the Word. Thanks for joining me this morning. We are in Genesis chapter 43 and 44, and we're just looking at that story of Joseph. We're getting down to where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So grab your Bible, get with me today, and let's see what God's trying to tell us. It's been said, it was written by early in the 21st century, a writer named Elbert Hubbard wrote these words: "The final proof of greatness lies in being able to endure contemptuous treatment without resentment." And for that, Joseph has passed with flying colors. He has stepped into this situation and found himself able to pass the test. Now, the question is, will his brothers pass the test? They're about to be flung into the most difficult of all situations. Will they react properly? Will they take responsibility? Or will they be found wanting? Well, we gave the family the opportunity to eat together yesterday. We showed how they had lunch. Benjamin got 5 times as much food as everybody else. They were having a great time. Now it's time for the boys to go back to Canaan. What's going to happen? We pick up in chapter 44, verse number 1, where it says, "Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill them in sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack, and then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain." And he did as Joseph said. Now, what's Joseph contemplating here? Is he contemplating the fact that maybe the brothers will not react the right way, and he will at least work out a scheme to keep Benjamin with him? Well, what is he thinking? I don't know. I think he's keeping all his options open. He doesn't know how this story is going to play out, but he's setting the stage for how it can play out with the best of all possible scenarios. It says, "As the morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys, and they had not gone very far, when Joseph said to his steward, 'Now go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say, why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done.' And when they caught up with them, he repeated those words. 'Well, why does my lord say such things?' they said to him. 'Far be it from you that our servants should do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouth of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves.'" Oh boy, that's some big talk, isn't it? Hadn't they already figured out that these things can happen? Oh, no, they weren't thinking at all. They were just saying, "Hey, no, we didn't do this. Come on and examine everybody's sacks. We'll prove it to you." "Very well, then," he said, "let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave, and the rest of you will be free from blame." So the steward already is kind of setting the stage for it. No, it's just one that we're going to want here. So in verse 11, each of them quickly lowered their sacks to the ground, opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Oh boy, here we go. At this, they tore their clothes. They all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. I mean, they were weeping. I mean, they were tearing your clothes is that picture of such grief and anguish that you're just crying out to God and saying, "Please rescue us." In verse 14, it said, "Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in. And Joseph said," and they threw themselves on the ground before him, of course, "and Joseph said to them, 'What is this that you've done? Don't you know that a man like me can find out things by divination?'" He's just setting them up. And so in verse 16, "What can we say to my lord?" Judah replied. Now here is Judah stepping up and finally being the man he's supposed to be, the eldest, supposed to take charge. Boy, he's grown since his youth, when if you go back and read the story, he was quite a character, wasn't he? He's changed. And yes, people can change. But quite often it takes very difficult circumstances for that to take place. Well, Judah's having to face all of that today as he stands before Joseph. Listen to what he said. Judah replied, "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, we ourselves, the one who was found to have the cup." Look what he's doing. He's putting the blame on the entire family. He's interceding already for Benjamin. In verse 17 it says, "But Joseph said, Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you go back to your father in peace." And then Judah went up to him and said, "Please, my lord, let your servant speak a word to my lord. Don't be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servants, 'Do you have a father or brother?' And we answered, 'We have an aged father, and there's a young one born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he's the only one of his mother's sons left. His father loves him.'" And he recounts the entire story, which I'm not going to read all of here. And as he does so, though, now it'd be important for you to go back and maybe read some of these details, something I can't do in 10 minutes. And as you read this, he confesses how important Benjamin is to his father and the situation that they are in and why it is so sensitive. And he goes down to verse 32 and says, "Look, your servant," speaking of himself, Judah, "guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, 'If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come upon my father.'" Here is Judah doing something you would never have expected from the guy that said, "Hey, here come some slave traders. Let's sell old Joseph to them." And look, here comes that dreamer. What can we do? Throw him in the pit. I mean, this is the same Judah that 20 years before was the leader of the mob. What has happened? How has he changed? Isn't it amazing how God can take circumstances and use them for our benefit, sometimes to break us to the point where we will recognize that we need to be forgiven, that our guilt has come back to haunt us, that we can't run from the consequences of our sin, and we need to once again give God first place in our life. Judah was broken, and he was at that point where now he was willing to be the oldest, the responsible son that he was always meant to be. Took him a long time, but he has finally arrived. But that's what broke Joseph as well. Go into chapter 45 with me and look at verse 1. "Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, 'Have everyone leave my presence!' So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers." And there's a lot of implications in that one verse. I won't get to all of them today. I won't even scratch the surface of that today, but think about it. There was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers, as Jesus, think about it, made himself known to his disciples. Many times, especially right after the resurrection, in secret, so that something else could be accomplished. But hey, that's another story. Verse 2, "He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him." Now keep in mind, he's already sent them out of the room. But he's weeping so loudly that they can hear on the other side of the doors and the walls. They can hear Joseph wailing. And it says Pharaoh's household heard about it. In other words, people are going around saying, "Man, you got to come listen to this. Joseph is just wailing. He is squalling like a baby in there, crying over these things." You know the story. Remember, these are his brothers from Canaan, because I'm sure the gossip had been moving around the palace. Everybody knew what was going on. And now Joseph is in there weeping. So let's see what he says in verse 3. "Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Now, is my father still living?' But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence." Can you imagine the shock? "What do you mean you're Joseph? Are you serious? Is this another one where you're trying to pull the wool over our eyes? Come on, man. Do you even know who Joseph is? What is this Egyptian trying to tell us? Oh no, is God really out to get us?" Now, I mean, all the things that must have been going through their mind and their heart at this revelation. But then it says in verse 4, "Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come close to me.' And when they had done so, he said, 'I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Can you just say wow with me one time? Here is the one who, if he had been focused on the offense, what his brothers had done to him, he could have said, aha, here I am, and now I'm ready to pay you back. I'm going to string you all up. I'm going to send you down to that prison that I was in. I'm going to beat you, everyone that didn't defend me, within an inch of your life, and I'm going to make you live through the rest of your life in slavery like you condemned me to. He could have said all of those things, and most everyone would have said, that's right, get them back, Joseph. That's not what he said. In fact, do you notice how he puts these things in perspective, and even, I don't want to say lays the blame at God's feet. No, that's not what he's doing. He's saying the ultimate purpose of God was actually fulfilled through your wickedness. Don't be sad here. Yes, you can feel guilty about what you did, but God understands. He even used you in your terrible, vengeful feelings toward me to send me ahead of you into Egypt for such a time as this, to take care of our family. The way he begins to give God the glory at this point, it may have taken a while for this to sink into the brothers and for them to get some kind of relief and to think, he really still likes us and is wanting to bless us and not kill us. Think what it must have been like to have this revelation dumped upon them all at one time. But the fact that he said to them, don't you be distressed, and don't be angry at yourselves. Now see, the point of forgiveness that's often missed is that we can sometimes forgive others. Then we can sometimes accept forgiveness from others when we've wronged them. But the hardest person to forgive of all is sometimes ourselves. When you look at the terrible circumstance that's taken place and say, oh wow, I did this to my family, or to my friends, or to my church. Look how I caused such terrible problems. And whereas you would have been open to forgive someone else for perhaps doing the same thing, you find much difficulty in forgiving yourself for the same transaction, for the same infraction, shall we say, for the same sin. Friends, you have to grasp something about this entire passage that really comes down to this verse. Joseph is saying, don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here. He's saying, look, I can forgive you. Now you need to be able to forgive yourselves. Why? Because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. He explains the background and how bad. He says, you think it's bad now? We're just 2 years into this. There are 5 more years coming. But God has made a way. Now listen, friends, a lot of you are disturbed about what's going on in the world or in your country right now. Hard times ahead. Well, that's right. And there may be even more difficult times than you can imagine. For many of us, we're beginning to think, watching what's going on with some of our governments, that we won't even recognize what's going on a couple of years down the road, may not even recognize our own country. Does that mean God has forsaken his people? Hardly. It does mean, however, that you have to grasp this picture of God as the sovereign Lord of the universe, who is not taken by surprise by the world's events. No, friends, listen, very much as Joseph would say then, I believe God would echo down to us today through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the New Testament Joseph, the one who said, when you see all these things coming to pass, don't be frightened. I've told you everything ahead of time. And I told you everything ahead of time not to scare you, but to let you know that I'm in control, that God has a plan, and you, my friends, are part of it. So listen up, listen to the words of the Lord, and relish in the joy of the Lord that we experience when we see through the circumstances of everyday life and look up and see the ultimate plan of God. Well, that's where we're going to stop today. The plan continues tomorrow, and we'll see just how far Joseph goes in this thing to begin to rescue the very Hebrew people, and maybe not understanding it completely, because he said, so that God would preserve for us a remnant on earth. Does he really grasp the fact that there's a Messiah coming? You see, we're on the side opposite of Moses, okay? He doesn't understand Passover. Passover hasn't happened yet. The blood on the doorposts and all the other things. There's a Messiah, a deliverer coming, but does Joseph have a concept of these things? Nobody knows God is in control, and he's going to do something miraculous. And because of that, listen, we look forward to that time when it begins to be plain what God is going to do. He is going to provide an escape from Egypt, ultimately, with this now strong nation that will go back to the promised land, and the symbol of his deliverance, the Passover feast, the Passover meal, that will point toward a Messiah that will come eventually in the person of Jesus Christ. Oh, friends, God's got a plan, and it's way bigger than we think. And that's what was going on here with the life of Joseph. He didn't know all the plan, but he was willing to say, I'm committing it into God's hands because I know my God, and my God has got a plan, and his plan will not fail. Thanks for joining me today. We'll do this again right here tomorrow as we wake up in the Word. Please join me, share it, invite a friend, and let's wake up in the Word together.